It's the Real News Network. I'm Sharmini Pires coming to you from Baltimore. On Thursday this week, presidential candidates Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders squared off in Brooklyn for the 9th Democratic presidential debate. Early in the debate, the discussion turned to the issue of minimum wage and the fight for 15. Here's what each of the candidates had to say.
And I will work as hard as I can to raise the minimum wage. I always have. I supported that when I was in the Senate. But what I have also said is that we've got to be smart about it, just the way Governor Cuomo was here in New York. If you look at it, we moved more quickly to 15 in New York City, more deliberately toward 12.50 upstate, then to 15. That is exactly my position. It's a model for the nation, and that's what I will do as president.
Thank you. When this campaign began, I said that we got to end this starvation minimum wage of $7.25, raise it to 15. Secretary Clinton said, let's raise it to 12. There's a difference. And by the way, what has happened is history has outpaced Secretary Clinton, because all over this country, people are standing up and they're saying 12 is not good enough. We need $15 an hour.
On to discuss the debate is Michelle Chen. Michelle is contributing writer for The Nation and associate editor at Culture Strike. She's also co-producer of Asia Pacific Forum and Pacific at WBAI and Dissent's Belabored podcast, and studies history at the City University of New York's Graduate Center. Thank you so much for joining us, Michelle.
Thanks.
So, Michelle, what did you make of the debate and each candidate's position on the $15 minimum wage?
Well, I think, first of all, it's quite an accomplishment that the Fight for 15 campaign has managed to get, to turn the $15 an hour minimum wage into a serious campaign issue. And it's kind of setting a standard for what candidates should be striving for in terms of a more progressive wage policy that would have been unthinkable a few years ago. That being said, Clinton was equivocating quite a bit. If you listen closely to what she's saying throughout that exchange with Senator Sanders, she is talking a lot about going in increments, starting with 12, going into 12.50, gradually moving up to $15 an hour. And then she makes these broad blanket statements about generally supporting the fight for 15, not actually endorsing a specific number. She also equivocates further by using this slight, weasel words, I guess you could say, where she says that she supports starting with 12 and then going to 15 on the local level, which is another way of saying that she doesn't support $15 as a floor wage on a national level. Moreover, she seems to emphasize and actually put the onus on localities to raise their own minimum wages, which of course they've always generally been free to do. And in fact, many states and cities have been doing just that. Many have already reached $15 an hour, something close to it, just as New York and California did recently. But that's not at issue here. The issue is, what would she want to set as a national minimum wage, which is of course going to guide the standards and the future fights for higher wages that happen on the state and local level. By setting a deliberately lower bar, which she is actively doing, she's making it harder for the other localities to get to 15, because if the $15 minimum wage were set at the federal level, then there wouldn't be any debate on the local level.
Now, she argues that she is inching her way up. She's starting at 12 because it would not be successful in Congress, or that it wouldn't be viable to proceed at 15, that we should get 12 passed and then we can work at 15. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, if that's her position, then she should just come right out and say, I think we should start with 12, and that should be the minimum wage. The minimum wage is, of course, the minimum wage. I mean, I think it's frankly a little bit deceptive to say I support a $12 floor wage, but I would I wouldn't oppose local efforts to push up to anything higher. I mean, of course, a Democrat would broadly support anyone who wants to make the minimum wage in the local level higher than the federal minimum wage, but that's not really the point.
Given this position on Hillary Clinton endorsing 12 over 15, why are so many labor I should say unions, labor unions, why are they supporting Hillary over Bernie when Bernie is so clear on the 15?
Well, I mean, I think there are a lot of sort of political nuances that go into what large establishment unions calculate when they're endorsing a candidate. They may simply think that Hillary is, got a guaranteed path to the White House, and they're willing to play it safe with the establishment candidate. Perhaps some of them genuinely believe in her more conservative message. Certainly $15 an hour as the minimum wage is not the only labor issue on the table. Maybe they're interested in, supporting the Democratic establishment as a whole because they have stakes, at the state and local level in electing more mainstream Democrats. Either way, I mean, from a labor movement perspective more broadly, if you are in favor of what Sanders is saying, then that probably means that you are looking sort of in a more visionary way at the way labor is structured in the U.S. and how inequality has really had such a pernicious and harmful effect on all working people that might be somewhat different from the specific agendas of unions when it comes to mainstream elections.
Now, there's a growing concern on the part of rank and file union members that the union leadership is actually not representing what they would like to see. More and more unions are coming out to support Bernie Sanders here, particularly in the case of, say, Verizon, and both Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders were on the picket lines. But overwhelmingly, Bernie Sanders' position is much clearer, and the workers on the picket line seems to be with him on this. Do you think that's replicated in other unions?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised that the rank and file is taking a more radical or progressive position when it comes to the elections than their leaders are. It kind of comes with the territory. Rank and file tend to be a little bit more progressive, a little bit more bold in what they're willing to push for. And leadership tends to be more cautious. That happens in many, many large organizations, right? So, it's unfortunate, I think, that union leaders aren't perhaps listening more closely to what the rank and file are saying and willing to, be bolder in terms of what they're willing to support in the presidential campaign. That being said, I mean, they could be particularly fearful of a Trump presidency. They might feel like there's a lot at stake if they don't support the supposedly safe Democratic candidate. So, there can be other political factors at play. From a broader labor perspective, I would say that elections can only do so much anyway, right? Even Sanders, who's running for president, has referred to this. What really matters is what's going on at the grassroots, which is why on the $15 minimum wage issue, I mean, I return to the fact that, a few years ago, even contemplating a $15 minimum wage at the national level would have been seen as a ridiculous, even laughable idea. So, that's getting attention not because Clinton or Sanders has, decided to fixate on that number. It's because people have pushed for that from below and brought it from the fringes into the center of the political sphere right now. And that's why we're seeing it become a national campaign issue, regardless of what individual candidates are saying.
Michelle, labor unions seem to be divided when it comes to Bernie and Hillary, but Hillary is still carrying much of the bigger unions with her, in spite of the fact that a lot of them had been burned by the Obama's campaign promises. Doesn't seem to have an impact on them. Why is this?
Because unions are large organizations with, heavy political stakes in preserving often the status quo or something close to it. I mean, it's very difficult to have an organization representing tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of members and, not be inclined at least to take some more establishment positions, I guess. I mean, in terms of just the way the mainstream labor unions work, a lot of it is business unionism, and that's been a pattern throughout history. It's not new to this administration or new to the Obama administration. I think, that being said, unions for their part are probably, the largest progressive pro worker organizations that have a voice in, the elections. And I think it can be seen as, quite unfortunate, even regressive in some arenas when the positions they take on issues are tend to be more cautious. And I think that the disillusionment experienced during the Obama administration, perhaps that should be a lesson that labor leaders should take to heart. It should send a message, I guess, when your rank and file are growing increasingly disillusioned with the union leadership, and you see this disparity between a more radical message percolating from below and union leaders who consistently decide to side with the mainstream because that is the safe position. And perhaps if labor unions were more willing to take bolder as opposed to safe positions, then the progressive dialogue in this country could actually, move the bar a little bit. Right now, things have been ebbing closer and closer to the center and towards the right. And sadly, I think you're seeing some of the manifestations of the backlash with Trump's support among some blue collar workers and even some union members. So, that could be another consequence. The more disillusioned rank and file members get, the more they start to sort of decide to opt out of the political process altogether. And that's not good for democracy, democracy with a small d.
All right, Michelle Chen, I thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to further reports from you.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.